Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy 2023. What is going on? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Recon in our new year. My name is Grace. I am a digital organizer here at the Redress Movement. This is the Recon, also known as the Redress Conversation, where I talk about things related to our work, things related to housing justice, things related to organizing, historical fun facts, memes occasionally, and anything else that I can think is tangentially related to the work that we're doing that I feel is worthy of discussion. So yeah, it's been a while. I think last time we did one of these was December 15th, so it's been like a whole entire month. That's crazy. But the holidays, things have been crazy. I hope you had a lovely holiday season. I hope you had a happy new year. I hope you are feeling rested. I feel like most people are kind of back in the swing of things at this point. So I hope you're doing well. As always, if you like what I'm talking about today and you want to follow along with more of what the Redress Movement is doing, I do have all of our social media handles down here. So you have Twitter over here, Instagram over here, our email down here if you'd like to email us. We're also on Facebook. We're also on LinkedIn. You can find us pretty much anywhere. But those are kind of the two main ones to reach us at. And then over here is our email, hello@redressmovement.org. If you have any questions or want to get more involved, you can shoot us an email there. You'll be connected with one of our digital organizers like myself. But in the meantime, let's get into what we're talking about today. So, I thought it was only fitting to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and his work in housing justice. A lot of people obviously are very familiar with MLK and his work in the civil rights movement and in racial justice, but that also extended to housing justice as well. And I thought it was worth, this is like maybe a slightly lesser known part of his work, and I just think it's worth noting as we come up on his birthday and Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which, as you know, I believe is Monday. It's Monday because it's the third Monday of January. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and I'll get a little bit more into why it's so heavily on my mind. But I wanted to get a little bit into that, and talk a little bit about the impact of his work, and then also just the history there, because I think it's a little bit lesser known. Yeah, there was something else I was just going to say that wasn't the check-in question. Oh, okay. Well, so let me go on this tangent a little bit. So my check-in question for today, as you know, I always do a check-in question. If you're tuning in live, you can answer in the chat. If you're watching after the fact, you can leave a comment wherever you see this and answer the check-in question. Please do it. I want to see it. I want to know your answer. The check-in question today is, do you share a birthday with any celebrities? So it's obviously MLK's birthday. Do you share a birthday with any celebrities? And shamelessly, I actually share a birthday with Martin Luther King Jr. Oh my God, what are the odds? What are the odds? I distinctly remember when I found this out. This is like, I'm sorry for the tangent, but I distinctly remember the day I found this out because I was in, I believe, the first grade. Yeah, I was definitely I was in the second grade. Because that was when in my elementary school, they kind of started teaching you about like the civil rights movement. We had like a lot of units on the civil rights movement throughout my elementary school. Good for them. But throughout my elementary school and into like through the 5th grade, 6th grade kind of a thing. So anyway, I think the second grade was kind of when you first started to get introduced to it, just as like, maybe not so much like the violence that was perpetrated against people who were innocent protesters, but more so just like, this is what it was about. And this is like why we value diversity kind of a thing. So anyway, I remember being in the library at my elementary school, and the librarian was teaching us about Martin Luther King Jr., and she said his birthday was January 15th, which is my birthday. And I was like, oh my God, I share a birthday with MLK. That's so cool. And I just always knew this about myself. And it was also always kind of cool because, so his birthday is usually the national holiday is usually the third Monday of the year. But there was a couple times where that fell on my actual birthday. So I always felt like I got my birthday off. But anyway, so do you share? So actually, if you think about it, I not only share a birthday with a celebrity, but it happens to be that, or not really a celebrity, but a historically famous person. And because of that and his birthday also being a national holiday, technically my birthday's on a national holiday. Anyway, you know what? We're not here to discuss my birthday. But that is why it's maybe a little bit more prevalent in my mind this week, and particularly why I wanted to talk about it. So, yeah, without further ado, we can kind of get into it. But let me know if you share a prominent birthday with anybody. I desperately want to know. I want to hear about it. Let me just get myself situated here. So yeah, just one more time. It is my birthday this week. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's not a big deal. Oh, the other thing I was going to do before I got into it was I had a little surprise. Hang on. Give me one moment. Everyone say hi to my cat. Say hi. Can you say hi? There you go. No, you don't want to participate. Okay. Go up here. Make yourself comfortable up here. This is my cat. I have hair all over my face. This is my cat. His name is Tex. He looks like a crusty old man. He is only 1.5. He is a baby boy. I did wake him up, so he is now grumpy. He doesn't understand, but he loves participating in Zoom calls, so which is great for me. So I thought he might be a good addition to have over here. I should just keep the camera like this so that you can pay attention to him. Oh, okay, and he's gone. So that's a new distraction you have to look forward to, is a cat always present. I feel like cats do really well on like live streams. Like people tend to love watching like live streams of cats just like half asleep. Is it just me? Is that why you're here? Is that your job? He's the intern. He's our intern. He's learning the ropes. Okay, bye. Thanks for coming. Our first ever guest on the Recon, ladies and gentlemen, Tex. Okay, enough messing around. I'm sorry. I'll focus. So let's do further. So obviously people are very familiar with Martin Luther King Jr., his work as part of the civil rights movement, his work in racial justice, his I Have a Dream speech, the March on Washington. Obviously, this is a history very well known to most people. But he actually also was very heavily involved in work pertaining to creating and sustaining affordable housing, specifically in Chicago in the mid to late 1960s. Housing was really a crucial part of Dr. King's vision for economic justice. Why do I always lose my voice as soon as I start trying to... I've spoken about this, I think, before. I don't know who I stole this analogy from, but I am not claiming credit for it. But somebody once described like kind of a triangle of sort of like... I don't know if you'd say like it's people's needs or what creates stability in people's lives, but it's essentially 3 points of this triangle are income, housing, and education. And if you lose one, the other two start to crumble. And that is very much reflected in Dr. King's kind of analysis as well, hence why he focused on housing. So in January of 1966, King announced plans to bring his crusade for civil rights to Chicago, Illinois. He partnered with leaders of the Chicago Freedom Movement, which was a coalition of 44 civil rights organizations. They actually invited King to Chicago to help bring attention to the racist and discriminatory practices impacting African Americans and BIPOC in the North, including education, employment, and housing. So I think this is interesting because a lot of King's work obviously took place in the South, and I'm going to get into a little bit like how it differed in the North, but it is kind of interesting. So during this time, Chicago was one of the most residentially segregated cities in the country. A contributing writer to Chicago Magazine, his name was David Bernstein, recounted the period when King arrived in Chicago in his article titled Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1966 Chicago Campaign. He wrote, quote unquote, King had come to Chicago to make the city the next proving grounds for his nonviolent revolution. He continues on and says, so I just realized he was like straight. He loves mirrors. So if he figures out he can see himself in this, he's going to like love it. He's going to lose his mind. Okay. Sorry. Bernstein noted, in the South, King and his followers had taken on Jim Crow segregation at lunch counters, on buses, and in voting booths. In the North, his crusade, called the Chicago Freedom Movement, would confront a less overt but equally insidious injustice, namely the discriminatory and duplicitous real estate practices such as steering, redlining, and panic peddling that kept Black people boxed inside big city ghettos. If we can break the system in Chicago, it can be broken in any place in the country, King declared at the Summit of Community Organizations in 1965. So, pause. I've said a lot in a very short period of time. I'm getting warm, mostly because my laptop's going to start overheating any moment now. So in the South, right, let's go back to this quote that I said. So in the South, King and his followers had taken on Jim Crow segregation at lunch counters, buses, and voting booths. In the North, his crusade would confront a less overt but equally insidious injustice. I think this is really important when we talk about the impact of King's work and when we also talk about how segregation still persists. And if you've watched me before, you will have heard me say many times, and you will hear me say it many more times, that I think a lot of people look at, especially when they hear about what we do at the Redress Movement, when I talk about, ending racial segregation in neighborhoods and in cities and in towns, they go, yeah, we got rid of that a long time ago. What are you talking about? Like, yeah, segregation doesn't exist anymore. But I think it's really important, and this points out, obviously from the 60s, but this kind of it's still there. It's just something different. It's kind of something it's less overt, but it's equally insidious, right? So there's a couple things that it has gone over here, and I am going to actually pull up some of our definitions that are on our website. So these are accessible to you at any time. But some of the terms it said, steering, redlining, panic peddling. I'm actually going to pull up some of our definitions for some of these exact terms, and we can go over them together. Give me a moment to get myself correct here. Here we go. Boom. Okay, there we go. So let's start. This is sorry for the vocab lesson, but let's just have some fun with this, okay? So let's start with the first one. Let's start with redlining since it's here. So the definition of redlining is a banking and real estate strategy that discouraged new construction, investment, and mortgage lending in Black neighborhoods with the goal of ensuring that segregated neighborhoods remain segregated. So this is also on our website under resources. Then there's vocab, so you can go back and click through some of these links. You're also welcome to look at more of the vocab as well. But we're just going to go through some of the ones we mentioned. Are you okay? All right. So an example is the 1939 redlining map of Chicago. Fitting. Gave an all-Black neighborhood on the south side of the grade of quote-unquote hazardous for mortgage lending. To justify its rating, it described the area located between 35th and 67th Streets, west of Cottage Grove Avenue and east of State Street, as having suffered from, quote, an infiltration of, I'm not going to say it. It further warned that unless various real estate protective associations are strong enough to restrict the colored people, ultimately they will spread over that territory east of Cottage Grove between 39th and 47th Street. Contrary to fears of property suddenly being worth less, appraisers also said that since 1935, rents increased in that area by 30%, but only for Black residents. Sorry, I don't know, the frog in my throat. So that's redlining. And this is also, you're probably familiar with this if you've dabbled in segregation before or looked at the history of segregation. These are the maps that people always show, right? And they show this area is literally red. This is pretty popular, but you may not know the actual definition. What's the next one we got? We have, some of these are okay, racial steering. This is the next one. So racial steering is defined as when realtors intentionally guide home buyers and renters to segregated neighborhoods. I think this is something that people when a lot of people talk about segregation and they talk about steering, this is kind of where I think a lot of people say things like, well, it's not that it's not that people are forced to stay in segregated neighborhoods anymore. They just even people who think that it doesn't, our neighborhoods aren't still segregated, they kind of say well, that's because of people's choice to live in neighborhoods where people look like them. Or they say, it's just because individual realtors are racist, right? So then the example of this is that in 2000, HUD and the Urban Institute conducted the National Housing Discrimination Study to study the extent to which realtors were guiding minority home buyers away from homes in integrated or white neighborhoods by offering homes in minority neighborhoods. Observing 20 metropolitan areas across the country, they found that the practice of steering was occurring in all of the 20 area studies. The results showed that in at least 12 to 15% of cases, real estate agents provided gratuitous commentary that gave more information to white home buyers and encouraged them to choose homes in white areas with fewer poor households. On the other hand, realtors gave less information to black home buyers and mostly showed them homes in black parts of town. So again, this is just one of those things, this is a study from 2000, right? So when we talk about racial segregation and we talk about, this is an old issue, this is over, this is 2000. And I know we're in the year 2023, but it's not, we're not looking at, 60 years ago, right? We're looking at 20 years ago. And, if it was 20 years ago, maybe the number's gone down, but odds are it still persists, right? Let's do the next one. The next one's panic peddling, which I don't know specifically, we don't have that exact term here, but what I would venture to say, what I'm guessing is kind of the closest one, is I'm not saying, what am I looking for? Blockbuster. Yeah. This is what I assume is the closest one, and I think it probably means something similar. But blockbusting is when speculators use the threat of or action of moving black residents into an all or mostly white neighborhood to initiate panic, lower home values, and then resell those homes at inflated cost to black buyers. So there's a big example here that I'm not going to read through. But what I want to point out about this is that, again, I think this is one of those terms that people will look at, and kind of one of the myths of segregation or the persistence of racial segregation is that, that's those, white neighbors, that's their choice to kind of flee, right? And it's but not when you consider when speculators use the threat or action of moving black residents into the neighborhood intentionally to initiate panic and lower home values. That is systematic, that is institutional, right? That's not just it happens to be that these white neighbors are terrified that their property values are going down. They're being told by people with some authority on the subject, you should get out of here because your home values are going to go down. And those people are ultimately just trying to make a quick buck, right? They're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's really a distinction I want to make there. And I think this is really important to point out because this is what's happening not this exactly, but these are the kind of, again, they're not overt, but they're still really insidious practices that are still ongoing to some degree within this country, right? And so, what am I trying to say here? What am I trying to get to here? So yeah, it's obviously not the same. And I think this is important for a lot of us who are thinking about this work because I think we can fall into the trap that we're looking for really overt, it's not that these things don't cause harm. It's not that these things don't have a real, devastating impact on, the racial wealth gap or just on the accumulation of generational wealth. They do. And if we kind of diminish them as not that big of a deal or, those aren't really racist practices when they really definitively are, then we're missing a whole part of the picture. And of course it's going to be perpetuated. So this is all to say, right, in Chicago in the 1960s, right, Black Americans were systematically deprived of sufficient quality housing because they were routinely and openly excluded from living in certain areas, right? Discrimination, intimidation, exclusion, and even violence segregated and relegated Black folks to low-income areas with poor quality housing. So I'm going to go through, I think I want to go through a couple more of these. Because I kind of just said a lot of them too. Like now that I'm looking at these lists, I'm like, I just said racial wealth gap. And maybe this is a good, as we go through the new year, as we're entering into the new year, it's perhaps a good time for us to like check back in. Like let's do a vocab check-in, right? Let's do, since I just said racial wealth gap, let's go there. So the racial wealth gap is defined as the lasting impacts of segregation have created a wealth gap where the median white household possesses multiple times the amount of wealth held by the median Black household. So according to the Federal Bank of St. Louis, the median white family held about $184,000 in household wealth, while the median Black family held about $23,000. That's crazy. Like, can we sit with that number for a minute? That is insane, right? And it goes on to say racial discrepancies in home values and home ownership rates help fuel this difference, right? Which we can do a whole, there's a vocab section on that. We can do a whole moment about, I just saw it, I hate when I do this, devaluation of Black homes. Realtors and appraisers consistently value similar homes in Black neighborhoods less than similar homes in white neighborhoods. So, for example, homes located in majority Black neighborhoods across the U.S. are valued at $48,000 less than homes located in majority white neighborhoods, according to the Brookings Institution. In some areas like Chicago, these differences can be made even more dramatic. According to one group of researchers, the average home located in a white neighborhood in Chicago in 2015 was valued at a level $324,000 higher than an average home located in a majority Black and Latinx neighborhood. This is how it happens. These things don't, and I feel like I've said this so many times on this stream, but like these things don't happen by accident, you know? These things really don't happen accidentally. They don't just, like it's, when it's this consistent across time, you know, and across like, not even across time, but across like the data set of people, right? Like that shows that this is not just, kind of accidental. And that means it's intentional, right? And it's intentionally harming a group of people for some other group of people's benefit, right? And so I just really want to keep that in mind because every time I talk about something kind of historical, I do want to also bring it to the present. I want it to be relevant to the present. And I want you to be thinking about how this applies in real time. And so again, this was 2015. This is not long ago. This is current. This is relevant, right? And this is a huge difference, right? I mean, that's astronomical. And that matters, right? And we know that matters because then we go back to the wealth gap, right? We know that this is how this pans out, right? And this is make or break money, this is make or break money, right? I mean, this is like you can afford to send your child to a 4-year institution for higher education. And this is like you can afford maybe 1 year at a state school with a scholarship. I mean, like that's a huge difference, right? So, and again, that's built on itself, right? And that's the whole point of the racial wealth gap is saying kind of like, or generational wealth, I should say, is that it compounds on itself both in a positive way and in a negative way, depending on what side of that you're on. So yeah. So this is all to say, right? Like I'm getting into like random weeds a little bit talking about this. But to bring it kind of back to MLK, a lot of his work in Chicago was really around creating and sustaining affordable housing because he saw this as really important and tied to income, and he saw it really important in the way that it was tied to education and just in terms of overall kind of, I guess I want to say like economic like freedom or justice or just kind of his vision for the future. He also actually, I thought this was really interesting. He moved to Chicago during this time to live in some of these apartments that were, kind of where black folks were being steered or being pushed to or being forced to live in. Many of the apartments were rat infested. They were without heat. They were dangerous. They weren't regulated by their landlords, and they were extremely overpriced. So they were living, they were living in these super dangerous living conditions. But they had, for the most part, a lot of other people in Chicago didn't know that this was even really happening, right? And there would be even like riots between like kind of a white neighborhood and then the black neighborhood that was nearby it. But for the most part, like generally the people of Chicago really didn't know this situation was so volatile, right? So there was also a lot of this was also perpetuated by really unfair lending practices. So you can see this here. You can see I've pulled up this other article to talk about this a little bit. We can go into, I think I have unfair lending practice. There we go. This is what I was thinking of. So this is an example of some of those unfair lending practices. So there's reverse redlining or subprime mortgage lending, when lenders intentionally give loans with higher fees and interest rates to Black and Latinx borrowers. So many large banks denied conventional loans to qualified Black and Hispanic borrowers and disproportionately marketed exploitative loans to these borrowers, leading up to the housing bubble that preceded the Great Recession. According to a lawsuit filed by the Department of Justice, Bank of America's countrywide subsidiary charged over 200,000 Black and Hispanic/Latinx homeowners higher interest rates and fees than white borrowers with similar credit worthiness. Countrywide was also accused of refusing to offer these homeowners conventional mortgages for which they were qualified and which they would have been offered had they been white. So again, this is like, I was talking about an example of the 1960s, right? But now I'm talking to you about an example that's like in 2000, right before the Great Recession, so 2006, 2007, up until 2008, and into 2011, 2012, when the settlements were, the settlements were finalized. So like, this is not the exact like unfair lending practices that were happening in the 1960s, but you get my point. Like, this is still ongoing in a lot of ways. So let me just switch back to me. Oh my God, look at how cute Tex looks. I'm sorry. Look at how cute he looks, like, right above the logo. This is where he likes to sit too, like right behind me or like on my neck. That's his like ideal spot. He's very happy. I'm just going to leave him there. I'm just going to leave him to that. So yeah, they were also met with a lot of violence and a lot of riot. Dr. King and the Chicago Freedom Movement Coalition were met with a lot of violence from white residents who were, I was interested to see, were kind of meeting them with the same kind of rhetoric we hear now. Particularly like signs that said we worked hard for what we got. And again, I think that I mean, besides being like really ignorant, I think that also plays to this idea that like many of us don't have an understanding of these systems at play, and we fall into these traps of, like, it boils down to that whole white privilege conversation, about, well, I don't have any privilege. I worked hard for everything I have. It's like, but you did, like, you had a starting line. I know I've done the whole, equality, equity, and liberation graphic. You can look that up because I have given that talk so many times. But, it's also that example with like starting a race, right? And starting at the starting line, or starting 50 feet back from the starting line, or 300 feet back from the starting line is more like it. And then saying that was a fair race, you still ran the race. But you have to remember that you had an unfair advantage. And it's not to say that you weren't running. Wasn't to say that you didn't train hard for this race, but you can't say it was fair. So Martin Luther King continued to fight for fair housing and racial and economic justice up until he was murdered in 1968. And that's kind of like a lot of the things I was reading about this talk about like kind of the unfinished work of that, which I think is really interesting. Um, and I'm going to get into like a little bit more about that in a moment. Um, but first, I want to take our little culture break, which, if you've watched this, I always do a little culture break for the culture, something to just kind of step away from what we're talking about. And I was going, so obviously, right? It's MLK's birthday. Obviously, what I wanted to do was play Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday, which, if you don't know, was written by Stevie Wonder for MLK in order to kind of boost this awareness around getting his birthday to be a national holiday. And so Stevie Wonder recorded this version of Happy Birthday, which is very popular. And so I wanted to play it, but now I'm concerned about copyright issues, and I don't want to get copyright like claimed or struck down. So I'm not going to play it, but your homework this week is to go play it. I didn't really know. I didn't know before recording this. I knew Stevie Wonder wrote that song. I knew it was to celebrate Martin Luther King. I did not know it was kind of a campaign to get his birthday recognized as a national holiday, which I think is very cool. It is not shockingly a version of Happy Birthday I like to play on my birthday because I kind of feel like you can't, if your birthday is MLK's birthday, you can't just play like normal happy, like, you know what I mean? And I also am a big Stevie Wonder fan myself. So it all kind of worked out for me in a nice way. But that is your homework for this week, is to go and play Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday. I'm checking on my buddy over here because he's been a little, okay, you good? He's got a little like, it's maybe gross. He's got a little like snot bubble. He's been a little congested today. So I'm like debating getting a wipe, but then he's going to be all, like if I go and try and wipe it, he's going to be all distressed. And I don't really want to do that to him. I'm sorry that I should just rename this to like the cat conversation. Can you hear that? Can you hear him? Do you have something you want to say? Oh. Do you have something you want to say? No. Okay. No comment. All right. It's just me. I love, like, I just switched back so I could see the stream as you were seeing it, and I just see me lying next to this cat. I'm like, I hope that's when my boss tunes in and just sees me, like, not talking about anything housing justice related, just talking to my cat. That's fine. So, as I said, this was a big part of Dr. King's work up until his assassination in 1968. But what really was the lasting impact? And there was a lot of lasting impact, actually. So actually, the mayor of Chicago surprised many when he called for an audit. This was before Dr. King's death. When he called for an audit of housing conditions in poor neighborhoods considered to be quote-unquote hazardous for human life. The mayor met with King and residents to negotiate an agreement to commit the city to fair and open housing policies. Some black people considered the agreement weak, lacking any enforcement, and thereby representing a major defeat for the movement and their efforts in Chicago. Dr. King, however, declared the agreement a first step in a 1,000-mile journey and declared victory. So take that up to your own interpretation. Seems like largely the people who were involved in this case, in this campaign, were kind of disappointed, but it seems like Dr. King's feeling was that, yeah, it's not the end, but this is a step in the right direction. The Chicago Freedom Movement achieved some other important victories. The Chicago Housing Authority agreed to build public housing in white middle-class areas, and the Mortgage Bankers Association promised to stop discriminatory lending policies. But by far, the most significant and far-reaching outcome of this effort was the passage of the Fair Housing Act in 1968. So on April 11th, 1968, 1 week after King's assassination in Memphis, President Lyndon B. Johnson again used this national tragedy to mobilize support for the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. This legislation expanded the Civil Rights Act of 1964 with the inclusion of Title 8, known as, that was so embarrassing, I had to count the Roman numeral, with the inclusion of Title 8, known as the Fair Housing Act, which prohibited discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of housing based off of race, religion, national origin, sex, and as amended, the family status. So that's a big impact, I would think, right? Like, that's a huge, that's both like a lot of wins in Chicago while King was still alive, and then also this lasting impact nationwide. Now there is something to be said for kind of like the repealing of the Fair Housing Act, which mostly happened under Nixon. So like, and it has kind of been being peeled back for years. So now it's like, but again, this kind of brings me back to what I was talking about earlier, right? Which is like, now in the 21st century, right, we don't have segregated communities, or our segregated communities don't stay segregated because there are laws that are keeping them that way. But it's through these more insidious and hidden ways, like exclusionary zoning and land use regulations, that make it illegal to build affordable types of housing. And other laws that allow wealthy Americans to block things from being built, and a failure to consistently use federal civil rights laws to desegregate, right? And, you know, like, the impact of this is that we still have a lot of the problems that Dr. King was fighting against back in the 1960s. So all of this, again, just to bring home one more time, if I can't, like, have a sip of your water every time I say that this fight isn't over. It's far from over. That's why we're here. That's why we exist. And it's unfortunate that we're still fighting battles for basic human rights that we've been fighting since the 1960s. However, I would rather still be fighting them than to have given up on them. You know, they're still worth the fight. That's why we're still in it. If it wasn't, well, I'm not going to say that way because that doesn't make sense. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have today. It's not, you know, too deep of a history there. I think a lot of people are very familiar with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., so I didn't really feel the need to go too much into his history. But I felt a need to kind of touch on this not smaller, but this other part of his work that I don't think gets the attention that maybe a lot of the other parts of his work get. And I think it's worth noting. So with that being said, your homework for this week, as you know, is to, on Sunday or Monday, whichever you prefer, to listen to Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday in honor of Dr. King. And this will be on the test next week. I'm kidding. I will be back, as you know, if this is your first time tuning in, I hope this wasn't chaotic for you. I stream every other week at this time, at this internet location, usually from 6:30 to 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. So I will be back in 2 weeks with another episode for you. If you want to keep up with all the other wonderful things we're doing, please feel free to follow us on our social media accounts. You can also email us over here if you want to learn more about the work that we're doing or get involved. We have opportunities for volunteering and for getting involved no matter where you are in the United States, but particularly if you are in Denver, Charlotte, or Milwaukee. We have field organizers there who would love to get you involved in the work that we're doing. But if not, there's still plenty of ways to get involved, and we'd love to have you. Beyond that, I hope you're having a good start to your 2023. I hope it is better. Well, you know what? I shouldn't say that. Maybe your 2022 wasn't bad. I hope it's going well. I hope you're feeling excited for all the wonderful things we have going on. I know I am. We have a lot of exciting things happening at the Redress Movement this year. I'm hoping for this. Let's talk about it. While we're here. I have a lot of ideas for this particular live stream for the coming year. I would really like to get some of my coworkers who are incredible at their jobs to be guests on this show with me, and talk to you all about the wonderful work that they do, so that you don't have to just listen to me yap on for 30 to 45 minutes, because who wants to hear that? And I just think it would be a great space for them to kind of speak very candidly and very casually about the work that they're doing, which is so powerful and so impactful. And I would also like to have other guests as well, and just, big stretch over here. Big stretch. I have a lot of other exciting ideas. I have a lot of other things I want to bring into this space. I would love to see more of you in this space, more engagement with you all, hearing your input, and really building something together that could be bigger than any one of us. So with that, I'm going to leave you back to your Thursday evening. Like I said, my name is Grace. This has been the Recon. I'm a digital organizer with the Redress Movement. I do this every other week. I'd love to see you back. If you want to see anything that we're doing in the meantime, you can go on our Instagram, our Facebook, our Twitter. You can also check out our website, which I showed you a little bit before. We do have a new policy brief that came out kind of towards the holidays, so you may not have seen it. Let me pull it up for you so you can see it. Oh, here it is. Not me not knowing where it is on the website. That's crazy. We have a couple different policy briefs. If you're a reader, we have this great new policy brief out about corporate landlords. And we have another one that will be coming out shortly in the next coming weeks too, which will be very exciting. So just, something for you to read, something fabulous from our research team that is a good read if you're interested in learning more. There's a lot of other fun resources on our website. Again, if you're in any of the 3 major cities I mentioned before, Milwaukee, Denver, or Charlotte, we have these great story maps that are highly interactive. And also, let me go back. I want to find for you our Say Yes to Redress campaign that we have launched, at the end of last year. So that's for all of you who may, not, here it is, who may not be in one of those major cities, but you want to really get involved. Let me pull this up so you can see it. So this is our Say Yes to Redress campaign. Can you see this? Let me just make sure. There we go. So we're building redress roundtables and committees nationwide. So roundtables are in those 3 places that I mentioned before: Denver, Milwaukee, and Charlotte. And committees are everywhere else. So if you live in New Jersey, if you live in Texas, if you live in Florida, anywhere else that I didn't mention, you could build your own redress committee. So that these will connect organizations and individuals to build a network of public will for direct action and policy recommendations to make tangible change. You can take the pledge to join redress neighbors who are working together to desegregate their communities across the country. By taking this pledge, you'll be connected to other redress neighbors around the country who, like you, want to make a change in desegregating our neighborhoods and are looking for like-minded folks. You'll receive our news wrap, information on ways to connect with other people, and invitations to upcoming events. We actually just had a webinar earlier today. It will also be available on our YouTube channel, just like these live streams always are. So you can always check that out if you missed it. But we have them pretty frequently, so you'll be able to catch our next one. This is also where you can sign up for our emailing list and fun stuff like that if you should choose to do so. We don't send you spam emails. We just send you emails we think you'll care about. So we have a newsletter that goes out that gives you an update on kind of what's going on. And they're usually pretty straightforward, pretty fun, pretty interesting, and about the work that we're doing. And obviously, if you'd like to donate to the Redress Movement and become a sustaining donor, any amount is a beautiful amount. If you donate $1, if you donate $5, if you want to donate $50, this is all wonderful things. So no pressure, obviously, but if that's the way, if that's what you have to offer and that's the way you like to offer your support, I'm not here to judge you. And there are ways to do that on our website as well. So with that being said, I think that is truly all I actually have for you. But thank you for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks for the next episode. And in the meantime, be safe, be well, and make sure you have a good weekend. Take care, everybody. Bye.